We are seeing the development. Let me give you a couple examples of these. We're seeing the development of. We're seeing recovery homes grow prolifically in the United States. Invisibly, not part of the treatment system, not part of AA and NA. In the city of Philadelphia, we just finished a survey of recovery homes. We have about 30-some recovery homes that are actually funded in Philadelphia, mostly for forensic or criminal justice populations. But there are more than 250 recovery homes in the city of Philadelphia, most of which do not see one public dollar. No governmental funds, no private insurance funds, and yet we have this new institution inside the recovery community organized by and for people in recovery. But what happens if you're in that home, you've had aspirations, your school plans got destroyed or diverted because of your addiction, and you want to return to school? If somebody called you as an expert with an 18-year-old child that was now 6 months into recovery, and the parents said, because you're in the field, I want to ask you a question. I got a son or daughter early in recovery. They're ready to head off to a college and university. Do you have a recommendation for me? Because in research, we call these abstinence-hostile environments. What are the prospects of somebody with 5 or 6 months of recovery landing on a college campus in the United States? I would suggest not good. What do you think the prospects are of an adolescent who goes through 90 days of inpatient rehab 4 states away and comes back and 24 hours after they're back home re-enters the public high school? What do you think the odds are of their recovery in this environment? They will be devoured. And the speed at which that occurs is terrifying. So some people said people need recovery-conducive educational settings. So wouldn't it be neat if we actually created a recovery program on a college or university campus? Or maybe we should organize a recovery high school as an alternative school within a city like Atlanta. And you know what we've learned by those? Very high sobriety rates. And not only that, what do you think we've learned about academic achievement of these? I've studied 2. The most recent one was at Texas Tech University, the recovery program on the campus of Lubbock. The students who are there in recovery on scholarship, hear me, because of their recovery status. And you know where the scholarships came from? From the recovery community and also families who had lost a child to addiction and devoted some of their financial resources to help another child survive in stable recovery. So they endow these scholarships and bring people in recovery back to college campuses. Those students have a grade point average a full point higher than the student average of that university. I went to an open 12-step meeting on a Wednesday night on a campus. There are more than 200 students at this meeting. And I know there are only 45 or 50 students in the recovery program. I said, where are all these people coming from? You know what they told me? You know, some of us believe addiction is contagious. I believe that. I believe addiction is socially infectious, right? It can spread people to people. What we're also learning is recovery is also contagious. Because what we learned in Texas Tech is 1 student a week from the larger campus enters recovery based on their contact with this core of recovering students we have on this campus. Is that an incredible story? Recovery homes, recovery schools, but I don't have a place to work. I may be 35 years old and never have a legitimate employment, never paid Social Security, never drew a paycheck. I may have advanced training and background in sales, but nothing I can put on my resume. Right? So how do I transfer that world? I mean, what am I supposed to do in recovery? How do I support myself in recovery? We need recovery-conducive places of employment, particularly for people at the earliest stages. How about recovery-conducive places for employment for people coming back from prison, re-entering the life of our communities? So we're now getting places like recovery at work in the city of Atlanta, right? Where people in recovery with that kind of history can come in and work under the supervision of other people in recovery and learn some things about mainstream employment and work habits and drawing a paycheck and getting a checking account and all that kind of stuff. If we go back not very far, 15 years ago, let's go back to the mid-1980s even. We got a cocaine epidemic raging in urban areas of the United States, devastating African American communities in particular. We got an AIDS epidemic that is roaring and devastating poor communities of color. How many churches had their doors open in 1985 welcoming crack cocaine addicted people with HIV into their congregations? Very few. And today, many of those same churches have vibrant, hear me, vibrant recovery ministries who not only welcome people when they knock on the door, they go get them. Aggressive outreach programs to bring wounded people from within their community into the fellowship of that church. Elaborate, faith-based frameworks of long-term recovery. Do you think part of the political and cultural, if you think of social movements, if you think of the civil rights movement, if you think of the women's movement in the United States, when those movements blossomed, did we see whole new social institutions created? Whole new organizations? NAACP had existed for what seemed like forever, back in the early 1900s. I think it was 1905. And that was about it. And all of a sudden we're hearing about what? We're hearing about SNCC. We're hearing about CORE. And on and on. We began to get this explosions of civil rights organizations as that community came alive. And we saw the same thing in the women's movement. We saw shifts in language, right? We saw shifts in how people dressed and how they looked and the names they would allow and not allow be applied to them, right? Are we seeing that kind of political and cultural awakening inside the culture of recovery in the United States right now as we speak? We are seeing that kind of parallel cultural development where cultures of recovery are developing their own language and values and rituals, and they're using art and they're using music, all of these to promote recovery. What's fundamentally different about this is what before we always had were individual communities of recovery who basically were in competition and conflict with one another, right? So if there were any early alternatives to AA or NA, they spent half their time criticizing AA and NA, right? Before you could ever figure out, well, you told me what's bad about AA. What are you? I mean, what do you offer? I haven't heard a thing about that. Yet today what we have are all those same people. Did you ever think you could see a day where you would see thousands of people in recovery marching? AA members marching next to NA members, marching next to Women for Sobriety and Secular Organization for Sobriety and Life Ring Secular Recovery, marching next to, God forbid, people in medication-assisted recovery on methadone. All under the banner that says we are not marching as AA members, we're not marching as NA members, we're not marching as Women for Sobriety, we are marching as people in long-term recovery from addiction. That's what this movement is about, fundamentally different. Now let's talk about what that movement's doing. And I'll give you some images over here in just a second.